How's it going, friends? On today's video, we're talking about something that I think is a fairly neglected area in this space, which is how to communicate as a real estate agent. I'm making this right now for you and also for everybody who's on my team. It's sort of a, hey, here are the rules that I'm gonna set forth on my team. These are the standards that I expect y'all to follow. And I'm saving what I think is the single most important aspect for the end, so stick around. I do believe that everything throughout this will be extremely valuable to you. If you're new, if you are struggling, if you are even current, maybe you're an old school agent and you're trying to figure out what the modern day way of doing it is, I believe that this is a perfect set of rules to go by. Let's hit it. First of all, when you are helping a client, the market is always so dynamic that sometimes it can be very difficult for a client. Whether on the buy side, sometimes very difficult to be a buyer, or on the sell side, sometimes it's very difficult to be a seller. So what I want you to do, I think this will help you retain more clients, close more transactions, and generally have people who like you better while you're working them. And that is to maintain a positive energy throughout the process. A positive energy, optimistic tone, just generally be, up about it. Don't be too much of a downer, and also don't be totally neutral. You're not a robot, your clients are not a robot, and at the end of the day, the optimism and the hey, we will get this done will allow you to get more folks to the finish line. And when things that are difficult come up, and I think you need to take this deep down and try to make this your personality to be a generally optimistic person, a generally positively toned person, because when something bad comes up, when you're in the thick of it, you're going to want to, as effortlessly as possible, just snap into that tone of positivity and optimism, because that really goes a long way. Even if you are, a duck, what do they say, a duck paddling where their feet are just moving furiously and they're just sort of calmly floating, that's what you gotta be. Even if you're stressed, remain positive, remain optimistic. None of this is the end of the world for anybody. Obviously, it's a very big deal. It's very important. We need to be professional and all that. But just know that you do have the ability to ask questions, to solve the problem, to get through to the other side. So be a professional in that you have been here before, or you understand, even if you haven't been there before, you understand that this is a thing that happens and we'll get to the other side. When you are directly representing a buyer or seller, one of the things that I have found is pretty important is that you potentially over-explain, and you want to make sure that they know that you're over-explaining. Say, look, this is stuff that probably won't come up, but I also don't want you to be totally surprised by it. Or, hey, this is stuff that doesn't apply to this transaction necessarily, or this offer that you're making, but there might be a scenario where that comes up. So then if you find yourself in a scenario where maybe a certain term or something like that does apply to an offer, you then don't say, oh, we could do this thing. And then they think, couldn't we have done that on the last offer that we didn't get accepted? Maybe yes, maybe no. And sometimes I like to say, hey, here's a part of a term that a lot of people aren't really prepared to do really early on, but I just want you to know that it exists. And you're certainly welcome to utilize it if you're comfortable with it right now. But in my experience, people take a few offers to get to a place where they're willing to use a term maybe as competitive or as aggressive as this. But I just want you to know that it's there. Some, 1 in 50 people might be willing to dive on that kind of wild offer term right away. But what I don't want you to have happen is 1 in 50 people are pissed off at you because you didn't tell them that existed, and maybe they would have won the offer on the first house or the second house if you had just told them that was a possibility. And if possible, I want you to be anticipatory. I want you to see the questions coming, right? So I want you to see these potential pitfalls as they're off in the distance, so you can say, hey, this is a thing that's coming up. Right now I'm helping some sellers on a home. It's opening weekend, it's a beautiful home, and we don't have multiple offers, and it's a very strange spot. And frankly, the potentials are limitless. It's a very, you feel slightly adrift, but I have done my best to say, hey, here are all the possible situations. I'm kind of explaining some of the negative situations, not trying to put out negative energy or anything like that. And I let them know that too. Hey, this is not to put this bad energy out there, just so that we are prepared if things come up. I want you to know what potentially the downside is also, because maybe you have a decent offer in hand, you're not that excited about it, but I at least want you to know, if you don't go with that and you wait for something better, there might be a situation where you wish that that was the offer you took because it is now better than what has come your way since. I think where this gets extremely difficult is trying to be comprehensive and not overwhelming your clients, right? Man, that's got to be one of the most difficult challenges when things get a little like, this is like a weird situation. There's a million potential situations that can be quite overwhelming, but maybe even just ask them, do you want me to potentially overwhelm you with a ton of information? Do you want all of these scenarios, or would you rather wait and see what happens? But I would also say that there are certain things that they're going to need to know. You don't want them to be totally surprised by a potential negative thing that could come their way. And if you can make some sort of resource for them, whether that's a PDF, an image, some kind of little like a graphic that you can send their way for a scenario that they might be in, or a video that maybe you release and it's available to clients or something like that, that could be helpful. But I think there's probably nothing better than the nuance of having the conversation and being willing to just go down that path and just work through any questions that they might have. Sometimes the questions are so left field that you're like, wow, I never would have thought to preemptively answer that question because that just doesn't make sense to me. So again, have something to offer them if possible, but also probably more than anything, just be available to have the chat if need be. When it comes to communicating with clients, I think one of the most annoying things that you can do is not proofread your texts. It is not that hard to proofread a text, and we are very much in that world where texts happen often. I also find it very frustrating when agents are making commonly making mistakes over text to other agents. I think it looks unprofessional, and I see it a lot coming in toward me where I can tell it was speech to text, and I'm a big fan of speech to text, but you need to just make sure, look it over. Did you make any mistakes? Did the translation make any mistakes? If you are obviously just speaking to text and there's tons of errors and no punctuation, I think that looks potentially disrespectful to other agents. And a person like me, and if you're anything like me, if you're some long-haired hippie, if you're somewhat, at first glance, you don't look like a classic professional. So I think the onus is on me to, outkick my coverage, to be that much more professional, more knowledgeable because of the way that I look. Who cares how I look? If I'm a pro, if I'm an absolute killer, nobody cares. Another thing that is really important when it comes to helping clients specifically is to communicate ideas upfront as early as possible in that relationship. There are certain things when it comes to pricing, when it comes to the market, when it comes to what to expect out of the process, that you don't want them to feel, like you're trying to pull the wool over their eyes. You don't want them to feel like you're surprising them or ambushing them with some fee or hey, you have a list price at this price, but here's how much you're actually going to have to pay. You want people to know that up front. You want to communicate that as best as possible up front. Otherwise, they feel like, why wouldn't you have told me that when when we first started this? Are you afraid of telling your client that you have a broker admin commission or some kind of fee that your brokerage requires them to pay? I get it, but I promise you, you will be better off if you tell them up front. Otherwise, I would say just eat that cost. If you are horrified about that idea, just eat the cost. It's not that much money. It is a decent chunk of money, usually, for most BACs. I'm with Real Broker. We as a team, we charge $500. That's not nothing, but it's also not going to be the end of the world for most people. Tell them up front so they don't feel like you tried to trick them, you are misrepresenting anything later on in the process. I can't believe I've made it this far in this video and I have not talked about this one idea, which is maybe the most important thing that you can do in any of your communications, which is to listen well. Part of that just means making eye contact. Part of that means repeating some of the ideas. And also I would say that means asking for clarification. Okay, when you say that, is this what you mean? Knowing that it's a dialogue and you're not just allowing them to talk to you while you're thinking about what you're going to get for dinner, that will make them feel much more heard and much more like validated in the process. And that's very, very important, especially early on, that they know that you're listening to their needs. And as you're going through the process, if maybe you're hitting some hiccups, some road bumps, and you're feeling like, these people aren't exactly feeling this, don't be afraid to have the conversation. Ask questions. Hey, is there anything that I can be doing to improve this process? Is there anything that you think that I could be doing that would make this go a little bit smoother? They might be totally wrong, but they might have some conceptions or some ideas about little things that, they heard somebody else's agent did. And you might actually learn something. You might create a new rule for yourself as, this is something I do from now on, because it solved that problem with that one client. And I think a great follow-up to that sort of active listening, that like very attentive listening, is adapting your communication style depending on the person, but also depending on the feedback that you're getting from that person and just the sort of the interpersonal feedback as you communicate with them. Different generations communicate differently. I use a lot more exclamation points than some of the clients I help who are maybe a little older than me. The period might seem like they're mad at you, but then you talk to them on the phone and they don't have that. So just know okay, well, that's actually not them being short with me. That's just how they communicate. They're not putting 3 exclamation points at the end of every sentence. But then likewise, don't be too professional if these people are pretty casual. A lot of people, myself included, if I know you, right? If I kind of know you as a person and you're helping me with real estate, or if I just was attracted to the vibe that you're putting out, I don't want your personality to change dramatically now that we are talking about business. I want you to still feel like the same person, but I want you to obviously be handling business well. But make sure that you're paying attention. What do these people want? Some people are horrendous at texting. Some people want to talk on the phone. I gotta say, my least favorite. They want to talk on the phone, every day for little updates or something like that. That's fine. If that's the client you're working with, that's the client you're working with. Adapt to what they want. At the end of the day, this is a hospitality industry. I've said it 1,000 times. I will say it 1,000 more times. And so if somebody wants to talk on the phone, then you talk on the phone, right? And if you're working with a young couple, but then their parents are involved, maybe financially or something like that, probably know that you're going to be having a slightly different tone with their parents than you are with your friends who are around your same age or something like that, right? Just be aware of the conversational tone that the other person is maybe looking for or is also giving you. There's an idea of mirroring in the sales industry, which I'm not a big fan of the sales industry, and the way they think, but I do think the idea of mirroring tone makes a lot of sense in terms of hospitality, right? If you were working at a restaurant and somebody came in real casual like, and you were like, yes, sir, right this way, that might feel like they might be like, whoa, or if you were working at a super, a restaurant and you were real casual, but these folks came in real dressed up, real calm, that might be a very weird experience and a weird sort of handoff of communication. So just be aware. Pay attention to what they're giving you and sort of respond appropriately. With one exception, this is a big exception. If they are being short or rude to you, you do not respond with that short rudeness. You kill them with kindness all day long. You absolutely are the consummate professional in that situation, but I'm going to take the higher road. I'm going to show constantly, consistently, that I'm a professional, that I care about you, I care about this transaction, and just because you were short with me, I'm forgiving, right? That is the professional thing to do. So generally respond in kind in terms of tone and casual nature, but do not respond to shortness or a curt language in kind, right? Take the high road, be the professional. You'll be glad you did. It'll serve you in the long run so much more. If you're an agent helping clients, one of the things that I can't even believe how often I hear about other agents who are not doing this kind of thing. It's just responding quickly. I think everybody knows this, but if you're working with somebody professionally, regardless of who it is, it could be a server at a restaurant. If they are not timely, if they are not prompt, if you can tell that they're just not putting in the effort to get back to you soon, even if it's a swing by, hey, I'll be right there, that builds resentment, right? And I would say even more so, if you're waiting in line at any sort of retail store or at a restaurant or something like that, and the person you're waiting on is just chatting with somebody else at work and like, yeah, just having fun. I don't care who you are. I worked in restaurants from like age 14 to age 30. I'm very, very forgiving of servers and the restaurant industry as a whole, but I don't care who you are. If you see that, that will get on your nerves big time. So if you have a client who's waiting on a response for you, don't post on social media, okay? Unless it's all automated, then you can say, I'm so sorry, I automate my social media. Then maybe that would make sense. But that will build resentment with they're like, so you couldn't respond to me, but you could post a story about something, that you were doing. Yeah, careful with that. I think one thing that you can do as part of this sort of timely and prompt response time is set realistic expectations. At what time will you no longer be awake or in front of your phone, right? I think most people have some time where they're like, I can't really focus on my phone anymore. For me, it's pretty late. I think for a lot of people, it maybe should be a little later than they think. They're used to working a 9 to 5, and well, welcome to real estate. It's not a 9 to 5. It's a totally different thing. Do not underestimate the importance of body language and nonverbal communication as you're talking with your clients. If you are showing disinterest or frustration in a physical aspect, and that could be your facial recognition, that could be your body movements, that could be the tone of your voice, but if you have that sort of negativity, if you're giving off a vibe in terms of your body language, closed off, anything like this, and just not paying attention, focus elsewhere, that is going to be a pretty frustrating thing to any client that you're working with. Luckily, we don't have too many face-to-faces with agents that we're working with in a transaction, but not in a transaction, you're going to run into other agents for sure, other agents at a showing. And if you're real just lethargic or whatever, you will eventually lose respect of some of your peers, some of your contemporaries, which some people, maybe you just don't care, right? But it's a pretty small industry. There's a ton of agents, but you eventually realize that if you're the one doing the business, that you will find, these names tend to repeat over and over again. The people who are doing it, the people who are busy, you will see time after time. And hopefully, you'll be one of those busy people. So you don't want to be a busy person who has a reputation of, being a dick. One of the hardest and most stressful things that I've found about being a real estate agent is when something is going wrong. Real estate, you can be busy, everything's going good, you can be swamped. You might be a little bit stressed, physically and time-wise and all that, but nothing puts the brakes on. Nothing is as sort of exhausting as when something goes wrong. One of my favorite quotes when it comes to conflict, when it comes to a problem arising, and I've talked to agents on my team about this, shout out to Nick specifically, is that time is fear's favorite food. Can't remember who said it, so if you know who said it, leave that in the comments. But time is fear's favorite food. If you are just stressing about something went wrong, right? Something went wrong in a transaction, something went wrong after a transaction. Maybe you had a client who was given to you on referral and they didn't like you, and so they went with somebody else. Maybe you're like, oh my God, I hope nobody, I don't want to tell anybody this. I don't even want to deal with this because this is a problem and it's going to gum up the works, right? I'm going to be all jammed up because of this problem. But the longer you wait, the bigger that fear gets, the more food that fear has, right? The more time that fear has, and that will become a bigger and bigger issue. And even if you're just an extremely analytical person and you're like, oh my God, I just overthink things. Well, I would say overthink this, which is that if you are letting things delay, then those people are going to feel disrespected and that thing is going to get worse. So don't let the fact that you are analytical be an excuse for why it's taking you too long to deal with conflict. The analytical thing to do is to nip it in the bud, take care of it ASAP. And I would also say, take accountability. I'm actually a pretty big fan of Jocko Willink's book, Extreme Ownership. it's good. It's very good. If you haven't read it yet, you just have to take ownership of the things that you can solve. Basically the idea is, hey, literally everything is your fault. And nobody wants to hear that. And it's not necessarily like actually your fault, but just about every single circumstance in your life, except maybe where you were born, stuff like that. All of that is stuff that you can influence and you can take accountability for and begin to change. If you have the ability to influence it, you have the ability to change it. And when something bad comes up, as you're taking accountability, remain calm, okay? That's very important. Remain calm, remain optimistic, remain professional, and have a positive attitude about it. It's really hard to be positive when something goes wrong, but it will be better in the long run for you to take that approach. And don't forget to use the active listening concept to really, if something is wrong, I want you to be so in the moment and so focused on solving the problem that there is no scenario where something goes wrong and then because you didn't listen well enough, something goes even more wrong. Or you start trying to solve the wrong problem. I've had people do that, trying to solve the wrong problem. Listen actively. If you don't fully understand the idea, ask somebody who does, okay? And know that when you're trying to solve a problem, there's usually multiple parties involved, and hopefully everybody is driving toward the same goal. In real estate, it's often a closing, a successful closing. There's the buyers, the sellers, the listing agent, and the buyer's agent, all trying to get to a successful closing. So just know that everybody has some interest in it. Be calm, try to solve the problem. It's a hospitality game, and it's a problem-solving game beyond everything else. And one very interesting fact about real estate is that it moves slow. Things take a very long time. From the first time somebody contacts you to when they close can be forever, and it can seem like so long. But one thing, look, if somebody has reached out to you and they're a year out, my God, just know that you don't have to talk to them constantly, but stay in the loop. That's a real person who you could eventually turn into a client who really, really likes you and is going to go to bat for you and continue to refer you people, right? They could be your biggest fan, but if you don't stay in touch, that might not be the case. They very well may forget about you. They might find somebody new casually who feels a little bit more accessible to them. And then after they close, do try to make ways that you can stay in touch with clients in a way that doesn't feel super strange to you, right? I will say I have a hard time, just calling somebody, texting somebody, hey, I was in the neighborhood, thought I'd say hi. I find that very difficult. I think it feels unnatural, but that's probably on me. I think that's probably something that I should just work on because it's probably not that weird. If somebody was in my neighborhood who I knew and they said, hey, I just happened to be in your neighborhood, I wouldn't be like, that's super weird, especially if they helped me buy the house in that neighborhood. But nonetheless, do it in a way that you find natural and organic, or as close to natural and organic as possible. For some people, that's just like an email list, right? If your clients are potentially the kind of people who would respond well to a market update and an email list, maybe that's the move. For me, I don't think that's necessarily the perfect thing to be sending somebody. We do meetups for our clients, but I also think all the content that we're putting out can potentially just be a nice way to stay in touch. They might leave a comment. You'll say, hey, thanks so much, miss ya. Hey, hope the house is going well, whatever. Or on their social media, you go out of your way. Any post they do, give it a like, say so cool, anything related to the house, be supportive of that. This is all extremely accessible stuff. This is all stuff that anybody can do. You don't need a fancy CRM for any of the things that I said. You need some degree of organization, and you need to make it a priority to communicate well. My name is Jesse Lynch. If you have any interest in working with me or joining Real, shoot me a DM, send me a message, or shoot me an email directly to info@tothetwincities.com. You can join one of my teams. You can just start your own team somewhere else and sort of work alongside me. I'd love to have you. Reach out, and if you haven't yet, do me a favor, subscribe to this channel, click the bell to get notified. I will see you in the next video. Bye-bye.